The snow was falling heavier now, blanketing the small roadside diner in a white silence that made everything seem slower, quieter, lonelier. Inside, the warm glow from the hanging lights cast a comforting golden hue over the few customers who'd stopped in to escape the storm. Behind the counter, Tom, the owner, wiped down mugs and pretended not to notice the mother and her little boy sitting by the window, the same window they'd been sitting by for nearly 2 hours. The woman had kind eyes but tired ones, the kind that told a story long before she ever spoke. Her coat was thin, not nearly enough for this kind of cold. The boy, no older than 7, had his small hands cupped around a glass of water, shivering occasionally as he stared out at the parking lot. Tom had seen a lot of people come through his diner, travelers, truckers, drifters, and dreamers. But this mother and son were different. They weren't eating, they weren't talking much, and they hadn't ordered a thing except that one glass of water. After another hour, Tom finally walked over, carrying 2 steaming bowls of soup. "Cold night to be waiting around," he said gently, setting the bowls in front of them. "These are on the house." The woman startled a bit, as if pulled from a deep thought. She shook her head softly. "Oh, thank you, sir, but we can't. We're just waiting for someone." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. The boy looked up, his big brown eyes full of confusion and something that looked a lot like hope. Tom smiled kindly. "Well, waiting goes a lot better with soup," he said, but she just gave him a small, polite nod and looked back out the window. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The snowstorm outside turned fierce. Still, no one came. Tom returned to the counter, pretending to wipe it again, but his eyes kept drifting to the pair. The boy had fallen asleep on the bench seat, his head resting in his mother's lap. She was staring outside, her fingers tracing circles on the glass, lost in her thoughts. Finally, Tom walked back over and sat across from her. "Ma'am," he began softly, "forgive me for asking, but who are you waiting for in weather like this?" She hesitated. Then, in a trembling whisper, she said, "My husband." Her fingers tightened on her son's coat sleeve. "He was supposed to meet us here. He said he'd be done by 6. He works up at the mill." Tom felt a lump form in his throat. "You mean the Havenridge paper mill?" She nodded. He paused. The news on the radio earlier had mentioned something about the mill, an accident, some kind of collapse in one of the old storage areas. A few workers had been trapped when part of the roof gave way. The roads were closed up that way, and rescue crews were still working through the night. Tom swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. The woman looked at him suddenly, eyes full of desperate faith. "He's fine, I know he is. He promised us he'd come back tonight." "He promised." Tom forced a nod and stood. "Then he will," he said quietly. "And until he does, you and your boy should stay warm." This time, she didn't argue when he slid the soup closer. Hours passed. The storm held outside like it was angry at the world. Tom closed the diner's door against the wind and turned the sign to closed. But he didn't tell them to leave. He just brewed another pot of coffee and kept the lights dim. At midnight, the phone rang. Tom answered, listening silently, his jaw tightening. Then he looked toward the woman and her son. He didn't have the heart to speak. She noticed immediately. "Was that the mill?" she asked. Tom hesitated, then nodded. "They're still pulling people out," he said carefully. "They said they'll keep working through the night." Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth. Her son stirred beside her, waking up. "Mama? Is Daddy here yet?" She wiped her eyes quickly and smiled for him. "Not yet, sweetheart. But he's coming. Remember?" He promised. The boy nodded and went back to looking out the window, still searching, still waiting. By dawn, the snow had stopped. The world outside was pure white, untouched. Tom poured 2 more cups of coffee and walked back to the window table, only to stop short. The woman was still there, her son asleep again beside her, but her eyes were closed, tears frozen on her cheeks. Tom touched her shoulder gently. Ma'am? She opened her eyes slowly, dazed. I must have dozed off, she whispered. Then she looked out at the parking lot, and gasped. A truck was pulling in, headlights cutting through the dawn light. She stood so fast the chair fell backward. The boy woke up, blinking. Mommy? Her voice broke with relief. It's him. The man who stumbled out of the truck looked exhausted, his face streaked with soot and tears. His right arm was in a makeshift sling. But he was alive. When he saw them through the diner window, his expression shattered, and then he ran. The family met halfway across the diner floor, crashing into each other with a sob that made even Tom look away. Later that morning, as the family sat together eating the now cold soup, the mother turned to Tom with trembling lips. You didn't have to be kind to us, she said softly. But you were. You gave us warmth when we couldn't pay. Hope when we had none. Tom smiled faintly. You gave me something too, he said. You reminded me that sometimes, faith is the only thing that keeps us waiting long enough to see the miracle. The woman smiled through tears and nodded. He said the roof came down right after he stepped out to make a call. He was going to tell us he'd be late. If he hadn't. She trailed off, voice breaking. Tom looked at the little boy, who was now grinning ear to ear as his father ruffled his hair. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds. That day, the diner stayed open past hours. The air was filled with laughter, steam, and the smell of soup, but more than that, it was filled with gratitude. Because sometimes, hope looks like a woman staring out a window in a storm. Sometimes, it sounds like a child whispering, he promised. And sometimes, it's just a stranger offering a bowl of soup, not knowing that small act of kindness will be remembered for a lifetime. Morning light spilled across the snow-covered parking lot as the storm finally gave way to silence. Inside the diner, the little family clung to one another, as if afraid that letting go would make everything disappear. The boys' laughter echoed softly through the nearly empty room, mixing with the clink of silverware and the faint hum of the heater. Tom stood behind the counter, pretending to refill sugar jars, though his eyes never left the family by the window. Something about the way the man held his wife's hand, trembling, desperate, told him that what they had survived wasn't just luck. It was something deeper. When the dishes were cleared and the boy was coloring on a napkin with one of Tom's pens, the man looked up. Sir, he said, his voice still raspy, I didn't get your name last night. Tom, he said with a small smile. And you? Ethan, the man replied. Ethan Ward. He looked down for a moment, then back up. You saved my family's night. I don't know how to thank you. Tom shook his head. You don't owe me a thing, Ethan. Just glad you made it back. But Ethan didn't smile. His eyes clouded. I almost didn't. The diner quieted. The woman, Lena, turned her gaze toward him, holding his arm gently. Tell him, she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly, eyes distant. It happened fast. We were checking one of the old sections of the mill. I was supposed to stay behind to help with the shift change, but something in me, I don't even know why, told me to step outside for a minute. I grabbed my phone to call Lena, just to say I'd be late. That's when I heard it. He paused, taking a shaky breath. Mark wiped his hands on his apron, glancing again through the fogged glass. The woman was still there, arms wrapped tightly around the little boy. The child's lips trembled as he leaned into her side, his small hands hidden inside her worn coat sleeves. Something about them tugged at Mark's chest. He'd seen plenty of people come and go, truck drivers, travelers, and locals escaping loneliness for a cup of coffee, but this was different. There was a quiet ache in the way they sat. He finally stepped outside, the bell above the door jingling faintly as a blast of icy wind hit his face. Ma'am, he called softly, approaching with cautious warmth. You two should come inside. It's freezing out here. The woman lifted her head, startled. Her face was tired, lined with worry. Oh, Thank you, but we're okay, she said, managing a faint smile. We're just waiting for someone. Mark frowned. The boy sneezed, shivering despite the mother's efforts to keep him warm. You've been waiting for over an hour, Mark said gently. At least let the boy come in and have some soup. No charge. She hesitated, glancing down the street again as if expecting someone to appear any moment. Her eyes dimmed with disappointment when no one did. He'll be here soon, she whispered. But Mark knew that tone, the quiet lie people told themselves when hope was all they had left. Still, he nodded. All right. But if he takes too long, you promise to come in? The woman's lips trembled. I promise. He went back inside but couldn't stop watching. Minutes stretched. The snow thickened. No one came. Finally, Mark walked out again, this time carrying a tray, 2 steaming bowls of tomato soup and a basket of bread. I know you said you're waiting, he said kindly, setting the tray on the bench beside them, but waiting goes better with warm soup. The little boy's eyes lit up at the sight. His mother opened her mouth to protest but stopped when she saw her son's longing look. Go ahead, baby, she whispered. The boy ate eagerly, spoon after spoon, the color returning to his cheeks. His mother took a hesitant sip, her hands trembling. This is really good, she murmured. Mark smiled softly. Old recipe from my mom. She used to say soup fixes everything, at least for a while. For the first time, the woman smiled back. But there was sorrow in it. Mark crouched beside her. If you don't mind me asking, who are you waiting for? She stared at the empty street. My husband, she said quietly. He said he'd be back for us before Christmas.